Hi, welcome to the Indie Author Insider podcast. My name is Candace. I am here today with Elizabeth Wilson. She is the author of Lonely Girl, which is a memoir. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I sincerely appreciate you being here with us, and I'm super excited to talk to you about your book. Now, I did just receive this in the mail, and I'm super excited about it. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about your book?
All right, so this is my memoir, and it didn't start that way, but this is what the form it's in now. And it's about my dealing with this concept of loneliness. That's the theme that sort of runs through the book. Where you meet me in the story in the beginning, I've just shifted to a new job, and I think I'm going to get everything finally the way that I want in life. And then something happens, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
suddenly sent, pulling up the roots of everything I had planted there and relocating my family to Colorado. And this was into becoming a mom, and I had to change careers, and I lost all of this sense of community and was really struggling with who I even was, like my
Mm-hmm.
identity, especially in motherhood, especially with changing careers. And I felt really lost and really alone.
Okay.
And so then I throughout the book, it's you walk with me as I wrestle with a lot of these identity pieces, the places that I feel lonely, including in my marriage, and how I deal with that, how I evolve from that, and the choices I make to put myself on a path that is much more in line with my identity and who I am now.
Awesome. So on the very back, like the very first sentence definitely drew me in.
Oh,
Forensic
good.
scientist Elizabeth finally has it all: a wife, a baby, deep friendships, and a clear path to the promotion of her dreams. So are you still a forensic scientist? Let's start there.
I am not. That
Okay.
is the big career transition that you walk with me through in this book as a reader.
Okay.
I was a forensic scientist for a decade. I worked at the state laboratory in North Carolina as well as the state laboratory in Minnesota. And at around the 10-year mark is when I finally decide to leave the entire career field behind.
Ooh. Ooh, that had to have been scary.
It was overwhelming. Luckily, I had aggressively paid off my student loans a couple of years prior to that. But I think honestly, for a while, it was the lingering student loans that kept me there because it felt so
Yeah.
shameful to leave an entire career field that I had like 40 grand in debt for,
Yo, yeah.
and not much to show. So it was
Okay.
scary.
Okay. So walk me through, like, so we have the memoir. Was your thought process initially to, like, write a book and it come out as, like, a fiction novel, or how did it transpire into a memoir?
So initially, I started writing because I did this 30-day sprint writing nonfiction program that my sister had signed up, and she was like, "Do it with me." And I'm like, "Okay." I've
Alright.
wanted to write a book, and the program was really geared towards like business owners who want to write a book to position their services. So something
Mhm.
that you is more of like a how-to or a self-help, something that you have, some sort of advanced knowledge in that you're trying to convey. So I
Okay.
brainstormed a couple ideas, and I used to help people with their personal budgets and paying down their debts. So I thought about writing a book about that. But then I don't know in what wisdom I think I had at the moment. But I was like, no, I'm going to write about this whole aspect of having to move and start over, because I felt like I'd already gone through some major shifts. I was at the point of deciding to write the book. I had some very early tendrils of connections in this new community in Colorado. I had yet to realize, the issues in my marriage and get a divorce. So I really thought I was sitting good for and could write from a place of, hey, if you have to move and your identity has shifted because you've left your career and your identity has shifted because now you're a mom, here's how you can get plugged in your new place based off of
Mhm.
the aspects of your identity that are important to you. Like, use that to find those people that you'll make connections with. And I thought I had some major insights about how especially women and moms could tackle that classic loneliness that comes with
Mhm.
those, you know year 0 to 5 of your kid, being
Ugh,
alive and having to share, so much of your life with them.
yes.
Um, so yeah, it was kind of laughable where it started. But when I read over the completed draft, I actually sent it off to a developmental editor. But as I reread over that draft over and over again,
Mhm.
I just kept feeling like I hated the sound of my voice when I was talking directly at the reader and telling
Yeah,
them what they should do with their life. And I
yeah,
loved the parts of my story where I just simply shared about what I was going through and the decisions I was making and what I was considering. And I've always loved both memoir and self-help as genres to read. But that was where when I decided to take this 100% memoir, I really don't want to force feed anyone any part of my story. I want people to be able to approach it and take what they want, what they are ready for, what's relevant, and what resonates.
yeah, that's awesome. So when you're reading the book, because I have not had the chance to read it just yet, trust and believe I will though. Do you feel like it reads almost as fiction because you are going along with your journey versus you talking to the reader?
Oh, absolutely. There's no point where I say you and I'm referring to the reader. I don't break that
Yeah.
fourth wall. You are simply reliving a period of my life with me. Um, it does have like a fiction-esque flow. I use the Save the Cat beats by Blake Snyder, who talks about, those classical beats in storytelling
Hmm.
that you see in film that can be translated to books. So it's very much a hero's journey kind of flow, a classical narrative story told chronologically. So it very much reads that way. The one way in which it will maybe sit more squarely in memoir versus totally reading like fiction is that I've chosen to include excerpts from my journals. So when you get
Oh.
to those parts, I think when you did your book opening, you saw those little floral designs or the
Hmm.
the images in the book. Those are clips from my journal. Um, so I think that in those moments, that's when the reader will really feel like, oh yeah, this is someone's actual lived experience versus that fictional storytelling framework.
Yeah. So I'm flipping through the book right now, and you know, so when I first got it, I completely forgot that we had had a conversation about this book, and my brain went straight to Lonely Girl. I skipped over a memoir, and I will tell you, as a reader, when I first opened it up, I was like, "Oh, this is going to be a really cool like crime fiction story," because your cover art does not scream memoir. You have this really cool police line, "Do not cross." You've
Mhm.
got this looks like a cup of coffee in the
Yes.
snow, and then someone walking away. So, can you walk me through, like, the thought process behind your cover design?
Yeah, so it'll make way more sense once you actually read the book. But so much of this story and so much of my healing evolution that occurs in this story happens while hiking. While either
Oh.
hiking by myself, there's a moment, sort of mid book where I meet this character that I call Lonely Girl. And if you're familiar at all with internal family systems therapy, it's a form of therapy that I was involved in at the time, and you assign your parts of yourself like names or categories. So I have a caretaker
Oh,
part, and I
okay.
have a lonely girl, and I have a logic brain, and all these
Mhm.
pieces of myself come together to cause me to have certain thoughts about a situation, feelings, behaviors, all of that. And this is a just a area of trauma based therapy that's gotten more popular. And so Lonely Girl is that piece of myself that in that moment was just screaming of like, this is not working, Elizabeth. Like
Yeah.
this is not good enough. um and it happened while I was on a trail, and then I used a lot of hiking to as I was sorting through the rubble of my life.
That makes sense.
The spilled coffee is a very poignant story that comes at the midpoint where I lost a cup of coffee off of the roof of the car, and the coffee spills and I'm crying, but it's not even about the coffee. It's
Yeah.
about what the coffee represented. It's
Mhm.
about the just level of comfort I was seeking in that cup of coffee that I couldn't find anywhere else in my life at the moment.
Yep.
And then to have abandoned the cup of coffee on the roof of my car, I was buckling in my kid in the back seat, and then I start driving off to go deal with something, and then I realize, the coffee is gone.
It's gone.
And there it just comes at a point where, like, emotionally, just everything was stacked up and felt like I didn't know which direction to go, but I was pretty much at my wit's end by then.
Yeah. And I think because I'm a mom myself as well, and I've definitely been in that moment. It might not have been a cup of coffee, but, we've had that moment of this is just not working. I don't know
Mhm.
where I'm going to go from here. I don't know what I'm going to do, but this is just not working and something has to change. So
Mhm.
I'm sure you discuss it in your book. So without giving it away, was there a pivotal moment where you were like, this is it? This, I have got to change and I'm going to make that change, and this is how I'm going to do it.
Yeah, and it's all really the lead up to deciding to get divorced.
Mhm.
Um, and that's not really a spoiler. I mentioned the fact that,
Right.
divorce on in the blurb and everything, but
Mhm.
yeah, that was the big lead up, and the reader will kind of go along that path with me as I'm trying to find all the ways to, like, recommit to this
Yeah.
marriage and to make this work and to see it through, and now we have a kid, and now we're doing this, and trying to be that supportive spouse that I felt like I needed to be. And just over and over and over again, not just in my marriage, but in all areas of my life at that time, it was just people pleasing after people pleasing. And who was the one suffering? Me. I was paying
Exactly.
the cost for that. Um, so yeah, you will, as you read through, you will see me, like, come to these different points, come to that edge of the cliff, and then multiple times I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. Like, I
Yeah.
don't know that that's the right move. I'm not ready to do that. How in the world would I
Mhm.
do that now? I've given up my career. I'm not going back to that. I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm in this small town. Like, what
Mhm.
options do I really have?"
Yeah.
So yeah, and there is a breaking point. There is.
I think that's true in any life story. You definitely have a breaking point. So when it comes to your writing, obviously it takes place later. You say that you get a divorce.
Mhm.
So when you're writing as a mom, were you writing this as a single mom? Are you remarried? Do you get remarried?
It
Um,
could be a bit of a spoiler. Anyone who follows me on social media will have had that spoiled because I do make a point to talk about my life. And when you write memoir, obviously our
yeah.
life continues to evolve and shift.
Sure.
Now, I love your question though, because when I started writing this book, I was not divorced. It was
Oh,
in
okay.
writing the initial draft of this book, sending it off to that developmental editor. That's what it was, still like that memoir,
Mhm.
self-help, clunky blend. My editor came back and said, "Oh, I love the parts of you and my then wife." And I was like, "Really? Like,
Mhm.
are what you think are, like, the best parts of this book?" Because
Yeah.
I knew that I had only put the most flowery, happy
Mhm.
moments,
Yeah.
like our first meeting and our wedding day and stuff, and I had not put anything about what happened on our 1-year anniversary or how things were going now, or the fact that I wrote this book called Lonely Girl, and the place I was most lonely was at home in my
Yeah.
marriage.
Yeah.
And so it really I stopped writing for a couple of months. I debated about whether the writing process was simply just for me, for my own healing because of the trauma I had processed up to that point through writing,
Mhm.
or was it for a future reader who may find themselves in a similar situation and also feel alone and also feel lost. And so eventually I had to get to a point where it stopped being for me, where
Okay.
because I really had told the story I needed to tell for my own healing. The
Mhm.
rest was just this beautiful exercise in being able to share my story in the hopes that other people won't feel as lonely as I did in that moment. I didn't have very many friends who were divorced.
Mhm.
I really didn't have any sort of model to follow in that realm. I was breaking family tradition, all sorts of
Yep.
things. So it was really, it was also a very lonely time. And so then from the point that you get to in my book where I decide to get divorced, pretty much everything forward, I was kind of writing as it happened, or at least journaling about it as it happened, and then coming back and writing, just a few months later. So
Mhm.
a much closer perspective. Like the end of the book ends in, I think, Mother's Day of 2024. And I
Okay.
finished the drafts and rewrites by, oh, like March of 25. So I'm not writing the end of this book from like years of perspective like a lot of memoirists do. So much of that second half of the book, you're with me in those feelings, and you as the reader, because I include those journal excerpts,
Mhm.
you're there for the nitty gritty before it becomes all okay. Before you know, from the vantage point now where, oh, life looks peachy and look what worked
Right.
out for me. And of course all this had to happen so I could get here, and
Mhm.
it would be so worth it to do it all again. No. Like when it's still messy and you're still totally terrified about whether it's going to work out or what's going to happen or if you're even going to survive it.
Yeah.
That's the perspective that the second half of the book is written from.
And I love that as a reader because
Mhm.
I have definitely been through some stuff and I have no problem talking about my journey. And, people tell me all the time you should read, you should write a memoir about your life because it's crazy. Like when I tell people my story, but you feel so alone when you're going through your journey. I
Yeah.
mean, oh my gosh, there have been so many times where I'm like, nobody understands what I'm going through. I'm a
Mhm.
single parent. His dad's an alcoholic. He is an addict. I'm by myself. I'm a teen mom on purpose,
Mm.
and I'm trying to get a divorce. I'm trying to leave, but what do I do? I have debt. I have this. I have that. Can I do it? And it is messy, and you feel ostracized when
Mhm.
you get married and you say these vows, and your vows are forever, and then you get married, and you are the most lonely in your marriage, and you're trying to raise a child, and you're like, okay, do I just stick it out for my kids? Do I just deal with this? And then at the end of the day, like you said earlier, you're people pleasing everybody,
Mhm.
you're neglecting yourself,
Mhm.
and you do feel so lonely going through that process. And so, as a reader, this is the very first year I've ever read memoir, and I
Mhm.
absolutely encourage people that are like, "Oh, I would never read memoir," to read it because you sit in that as a reader and you reflect and you're like, "Oh my gosh, somebody else totally gets this." And
Mhm.
then you can not really the comparison game by any means, but
Mm-mm.
you just don't feel so alone. Like, even if you never meet the author, like, I'm fortunate enough that I get to meet you. So whenever I do get to read your journey, I'm like, oh my gosh, girl, are you okay? um,
Right?
dude, how's that therapy bill going? Um, but it's so enlightening to be able to see that your life is really messy. And,
Mhm.
how old's your child now?
She'll be 7 in a few weeks.
Oh my gosh. Well, happy early birthday to her. That's exciting. But you're doing all of this and you have a whole nother life to take care of.
Yeah.
So with that being said, when you're writing this and you're in the messy and you're in the nitty gritty, I actually love the fact that you did not wait 15, 20, 30 years down the road where you're like, back then it was difficult, but I'm doing great now. Everything's peachy. I've been married for 65 years now and life is perfect. Because I think that it's that much more relatable, and
Mhm.
when it's able to be read almost as a fiction but not quite as a fiction, you still feel invested in that
Mhm.
person's story. I just looked down at the back of your book. It says, "This is a story about feeling lonely in every room and doing a deep self exploration, finding self love, worthiness, and a sense of belonging that no external circumstances can shake." That is such a powerful statement. And I love that it's in bold. That's what caught my attention. When you're sitting here and you're reflecting in this sense, I know that you had talked about journal entries and, kind of writing that through. How do you come up with like the way of just wording this? Because it just sounds so prophetic in a way.
Oh, I didn't write that sentence.
Oh, okay, I was just
I
kidding.
don't give me the credit for writing that one. No, my wonderful line and copy editor, Allison, wrote the book blurb for me because, as many authors will reflect, writing the book is one challenge, but then trying to condense everything you put into the book
Yeah.
into, like, 200 words is like, "Oh my gosh, how do I even begin to tell you what the story is about
Yeah.
without just word vomiting?" So, because she had read the book at that point, like, 3 or 4 times going through the, like, line and copy edits and everything, I felt like she was super familiar with the book, and I sent her my version of it, and I was like, "Allison, please, please help me with this." And she was like, "Okay, cool." And then she sends me a text, like, a couple days later, like, "Hey, like, are you wanting, like, suggestions, or can I start from scratch?" And I'm like, "Yes, please." Like, nothing is
Yes.
sacred there, like, start from scratch. So, this is her beautiful, synopsis and distillation of what she took from the story, and it was very much in line with what I hoped would be portrayed in the
Mhm.
story. So, the writing credit for for that sentence goes to Allison.
Well, I love that. And so when you're talking about the writing journey, that is also a question I have because as you had stated, authors, it is difficult for you guys to condense your entire, whether it be a fiction story or a nonfiction story. It's very difficult to condense it into something small. What has been the hardest part of the writing journey outside of the back blurb that doesn't count?
Mm. I mean, there's so much I've been terrified of this entire process as an indie author that as I live it, it's been
Mhm.
so simple that I am like kind of mad I was ever stressed about it. Like I
Okay.
just finished doing the whole, pre-sale for this book, and there was a time when I was debating about not doing the pre-sale at all because we had to move, and when the move got put right on top of my book launch, I was like, "Oh, well, I'm just not gonna be able to, like, have the
Mm.
capacity to do all that, like, I'm just gonna have to cancel the presale." And
Yeah.
now from this vantage point, like, it was great. It was pretty easy. I was able to do it just fine. And like there's been so many of those things throughout the writing process because there's so much we as indie authors have to like learn, especially if you're going to try
Mhm.
to DIY so much of it. There's a lot I did not that I hired out for. Like I hired out the formatting, I hired out the beautiful
Yeah.
cover design, like things like that I did not want on my plate. And I even hired an author coach to help me like walk through the timeline as a first time publishing author of like, okay, how soon do I need to reach out to ARC readers? When do I need to, submit my manuscript and, upload it to Ingram Spark? What does this look like? Do I do this one
Mhm.
first or this first? And I was so scared and stressed about all of that. But
Yeah.
none of those stresses or fears have actually come to pass.
Wow.
I mean, I was worried enough about them that I sought out the people or the answers to my questions. And
Mhm.
there are so many knowledgeable people out there that you can hire or, people give advice, on these forums and things. And yeah, it was okay. So if anyone else is like has a story that they believe in and
Mhm.
are just terrified of all those annoying little parts that it takes to get it into readers' hands, like just know you can do it and it is scary, but none of it will come true. So
Yeah.
it'll be
That's
fine.
very true. That's very true. So that is definitely very different than when I talk to other authors. They're usually like very overwhelmed with, finding ARC readers or
Mm,
but a lot of them are handling it, everything on their own.
yeah.
So I love that in a way you really took care of your mental health in that sense of, hey, I know that I need to outsource this and that's what I'm going to
Mm.
achieve to get it done. So with the pre-orders, I'm super glad that you did it. That's amazing. Were you ever scared that like your book just wouldn't take off and like nobody would want it?
I guess I knew that was a possibility. And I'm still not I mean, I believe so much in the story that I
Yeah.
know there are people that the story is for.
Yes.
I'm not even convinced that it's nowhere near found its, like, readership yet. Like, almost
Mhm.
everyone on my pre-orders I know in some capacity, either,
Mhm.
you know, through writing groups or they've been a guest on the podcast or they attended the Memoir summit we put on not too long ago or they're like a family or a friend.
Yeah.
So it's not yet through the pre-orders left my own personal like sphere of influence. And so
Mhm.
I think it'll be big. It will feel big or more significant to me once it like branches past those people who are simply interested in the story because they know me or they want to know more about me from the parts that they do know. And at the same time, like, I always felt like even if the book was for one person besides me, then
Yeah.
then that was worth it. And I've met people, like, even as I was finishing up writing the book, and editing the book within, like, the last year, I've met a handful of people that I'm like, "Oh, you need my book, you need my book. I need to hurry up and get this out because I know you need my book." Like, I had a coworker go through a similar, um, career-ending sudden thing, getting pushed out. Hers was slightly different than mine, but, like, the feeling was
Yeah.
still the same. And
Yeah.
that's the thing about memoir, right? Is, like, the more specific you are, the more universal it feels because you're tapping into, like, the emotions behind an
Mhm.
experience, right? So,
Exactly.
there my friend's experience was similar enough, even though the circumstances were very different, different career path, different kind of injury, so to speak,
Yeah.
about it. But the emotions were so similar that I was like, "Oh,
Mhm.
girl, you need this." And then I had another friend who's, debating about a divorce and like it's just like, "Oh, girl, I want you to read my book before you decide anything." Like, A, I want you to know how hard it is if you decide to go that route, and B, I
Yeah.
want you to feel confident that like you have enough justification. Like
Yeah.
you don't have to have like, I don't know, a burning red flag in order to choose something different for yourself.
Absolutely not. And I think so many of us get stuck in that societal expectation of you're married, now you need to work it out. And I understand that from one perspective,
Oh, yeah.
but when there is just nowhere left to go, it's time. It is time, in my
Mhm.
opinion. Everyone kept telling me that when I was married of, "Oh, that's the father. You guys are married, make it work." I'm like, "How long can I make it work with an addict that spends
Mhm.
every penny that we have? My child is going without food, necessary
Mm.
living conditions because his father has blown $4,000 at a casino in Reno, Nevada. And
Mm.
he is taking my son in the backseat of a car and while he's intoxicated. Like, how long should I put up with that? How long?
Mhm.
So it is nice to find a community where you see other people that have gone through something similar-ish enough to where you don't feel so alone and you feel more confident and, "Okay, well, it might get scary and it might get really hard, but I can do it too, and that
Mhm.
I deserve better." So when you're writing this book, how did you find time as a mom to write the book?
Oh, well, when I started writing the book, when I was still married, my daughter had just hit the age where she qualified for half day preschool. So I used to have like
Ooh.
a half a day. And
Yep.
I mean, that's how I got the
Every
book,
bit of
the
it.
initial version drafted. Like the first 45,000 words I drafted in the first 3 months. And it was just drop her off at preschool, just work, 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 pick her up. Um, Now, after I got divorced, I didn't have a job. My parents actually very graciously financially supported me for a period of time, probably about a little under a year. And I was able to use all of that time to
Yeah,
work on the book.
that's
And
amazing.
then I had to go get a job. And so
Yeah.
then I was left to work in the 1 hour window between when I finished my job at a preschool and before my daughter had to be picked up from school. And so there was like an hour gap. And I will say, I got so much more done. Like I held myself accountable to that hour that
Wow.
I got so much more written and edited in that single hour than the collective, like, weeks that I used to have when I didn't
Yep.
have to go to a job. And basically all my rewrites and edits were done in that single hour, consistently over the course of, several school years.
That's impressive because if you give me an hour, I'm so ADHD, I'm like, "It's pointless. I'm not even
Mhm,
gonna look at it. I need the whole day to focus."
mhm.
So that's impressive, really,
Yeah.
and oh, go ahead.
I used to have such a ritual. I was that same way before I started
Mhm.
doing it. I used to have such a ritual to get myself ready to write, you know? It was like, let me journal first. Let me pull a tarot card. Let me do this and whatever. Right? And to like to get into that like right
Yep.
vibe. And granted, there are some scenes that you write in memoir where you really do have to like put yourself into a place, right? But
Yeah.
by the time I was doing it enough, it took me like, I would set a timer and I would immediately drop in and be able to focus and channel that creative energy, and I
Hmm.
think it was just a muscle I had to build, honestly.
That's true. I mean, I like the idea of that. I might have to challenge myself to do the hour, set a timer and just
Mhm,
channel,
mhm,
kind of like as the kids call it, lock in these days.
mhm.
My son's 19 now. He's almost 20. He'll be 20 in August. And he's like, Mom, just lock in. I'm like, what am I locking into? But I don't know. I guess I'll just lock in. But I'm so ADHD and I'm trying really hard to, segue out of that. Because I would love to write a book as well. And I love
Mhm.
hearing people's journeys, about what they enjoyed about the writing experience, what was difficult for the writing experience, etc. But now that you have a published novel, are you planning on continuing to write?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh,
As far as I can tell, am just living the beginning of act 2 of the next memoir. So, the
okay.
next one will pick up about a year and a half after this one ends. Basically, around January of this year, I
Okay.
think is where the next memoir starts. Um, Life has drastically changed since the end of this book, and there's a lot more that's happened.
Oh, I bet.
And I plan to write about it, but I have no idea where the story's going. I have no idea how it ends because I haven't lived it yet. But
Right.
it is really fun to sort of live life as like oh, well, that inconvenience will be a perfect plot twist there at
Yep.
that point in the book. Like, ooh, that'll raise the tension for the reader. Yeah, I wonder how that's gonna work out. Okay.
Yep.
Um, yeah. And in the meantime, I would like to record the audiobook of this book. And I've toyed around with the idea of writing a YA fiction book for my daughter.
Okay.
And I've had the idea for like the last year, but really haven't put much effort to it because I needed to focus on getting this book done. But I really want to write some modern fairy tales that
Oh,
approach some more modern subjects that we have to have conversations with our kids about
okay.
and could use a avenue to do that. Things like cyberbullying and cults and
Uh-huh.
homelessness and divorce, things that are like a part of their world that we need to find a way to explain to them.
Yeah.
Um, but for it to not be too real and scary, hence
Right.
the fairy tale framework.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head with that because there are so many things. The world has changed so much.
Mhm.
And it's like we're afraid to have conversations, but then other people are having conversations on your behalf,
Mhm.
essentially.
Yeah,
And,
especially with social media and the
oh,
internet.
oh my gosh, it is the social media, as much as I love it, it is the bane of my existence. Um, and it's like the first lie wins. So, I was reading something the other day on TikTok actually with the comment section, and it was just like, we're so consumed with social media that we can't even form our own opinions anymore because we're
Mm-mm.
so locked into following something else that we're having hard times thinking for ourselves. And there were grown adults in the comment section saying, I'm guilty of watching a video and reading the comments and not even watching the full video through before I've formed my opinion because I'm going off of what people are saying.
Mhm.
And, growing up, we're watching cartoons, we're watching Disney movies, we're watching Cinderella, we are watching those fairy tales that never come true. It's unfortunate. So I love the fact that you are already kind of thinking about that because they are difficult conversations, yes, but they are necessary conversations and they don't even have to be difficult conversations. It's just finding a way to naturally implement it into the conversations with our kids. I love that you're kind of thinking more of like on the modern because we have our fairy tale retellings, don't get me wrong, in the
Oh, for
book
sure.
world. And they're usually spicy versions. of the fairy tale retelling. It's not
Or
really
it's like villain as hero twist, you know,
right.
like the whole like three little pigs and the big bad wolf, but
Yeah.
from the big bad wolf's perspective, or
Mhm. But then
Mhm.
in a way, though, the way that they're rewriting that to where it's from the Big Bad Wolf's perspective where he was the villain and now he's the hero, it's in my opinion, and this might be controversial, you're excusing the bad behavior and you're finding an excuse for the bad behavior. And when you find excuses for bad behavior, guess what's gonna continue? The bad behavior, because now you have an
Yeah.
excuse for it. So, it's just my 2 cents. I'm sure that's controversial, but that's okay. So I love the fact that you're thinking on, like, the modern day, how do we cross these bridges but not be scaring the Peawodens out of our kids?
Mhm.
Um, I had a stepdaughter for about 6 years, and I wouldn't let her wear dresses without shorts underneath because of, sex traffickers and pedophiles and things to that nature. And I was terrified of her getting snatched from my hands. So I would hold on to her for dear life. And she did not understand why she could not wear a dress without shorts underneath outside. But how do
Yeah.
you talk to a 4 or 5, 6-year-old about people that are
About
going
why.
to possibly
Like,
hurt her?
why? Why do I have
Yeah.
to go put on I know, I know. I have
Yeah.
the same debates about my daughter came up to me one time not too long ago and was like, "Mom, I wanna start a YouTube channel." I was like, "Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. Sorry, honey. You were born to a mom who worked in forensic science, who got to
Yes.
see the, like, just awful of the awful. Like,
Yeah.
there is absolutely no way, and this whole conversation of you wanting a phone is just, like, not
Huh?
happening, and,
Yeah.
like, I just sorry, that's who you were
Yeah.
born to. Like, and I know because of your background, you probably come from that same place where, like, even other parents probably think that we're overreacting,
Yep.
but we've just seen the other side. And sure,
Yep.
we've seen it in probably a higher concentration than, the average person encounters, so our senses are more heightened, but, we have that baseline. Our intuition is not wrong. It's just
Exactly.
we're more aware.
Absolutely. And I understand, like, my son, he used to get really frustrated with the decisions I would make. And I'm like, I'm doing this to protect you. And now that he's 19, he's like, I see why you made those
Mm,
decisions. And I'm like, yeah, thank you. I mean, working in the criminal justice field, you do see a lot of stuff and
yeah.
it's not pretty. And it's unfortunate, but I'm so thankful that we have that experience. And I would
Mhm,
much rather argue with my 7-year-old for 2 years, and then whenever, they're of age, they're like, "Oh, thank you for protecting me." Getting on social
mhm.
media, I see kids all the time all over social media, and I'm like, "Ugh, okay. If that's your choice, that's your choice, but do you understand how much danger you're putting them in
Yeah.
by putting them on the social media platform? You're exposing their face, you're exposing them to people that are watching them for
Mm,
all the wrong reasons."
mhm.
Um, so that could be a whole podcast episode on its own, because
But
I
you
love
hit on
talking
a
about
good
stuff like
point
that.
because, like, I the thing of, like, your son reflecting back to you that, like, "Oh, mom, I get it now. I get why you made
Mhm.
those choices." That was so much of my motivation to keep going with this writing project for my daughter. Of course,
Yeah.
she cannot read this book at 7 years old, and this
Right.
material is not appropriate for her for quite some time. But at
Right.
some point in the future, I would love for her to at least see my perspective of
Mhm.
why I made those choices that drastically impacted her life,
Yeah.
and maybe with some of that perspective, she will understand why I made those choices.
Absolutely. So with you being the forensic scientist, do you talk about that experience in your book at all? Like with that career field and how it like tied into your life? Or is that just like that was my career and then I pivoted away from it?
So, where you meet me in the story, I am leaving the state crime lab in North Carolina after having worked there for about 6 years, and I am transferring to a similar position at the state crime lab in Minnesota. So yes, you join me sort of mid-career.
Okay.
And the first mm, 10, 12 chapters of the book, um, you are with me through major turning points in that career path and why I ultimately decided to leave it and the ways in which I was struggling with it even at
Mhm.
that transition point between leaving the lab in North Carolina and going and pursuing it in Minnesota.
Yeah. Ooh, Minnesota. I love Minnesota.
Me too.
That's amazing though. I mean, we talked a little bit before the podcast. I have a master's degree in criminal justice, and I think TV helps us glorify a lot of these positions. And, do you feel like that career in any way had an impact on your marriage?
Oh, that's a good question. If anything, I think it brought us more together because my ex was in the military.
Oh,
Um, she was military police, so I think, and
oh,
she was previously a firefighter and an EMT. So I think we understood that side of
okay.
one another because of that similarity in career path, like, and having to see the hard stuff and do it anyways, and
Yeah.
having to push through the burnout or the, fatigue or whatever,
Uh-huh.
because you may be hour 24 into your mission or your crime scene, but like it's got to get done. Um, so if anything, I think it was more of like a trauma bond type thing than something that would like cause a wedge. I felt
Yeah.
like we really understood those parts of each other.
Yeah, I mean, trauma bonds are absolutely a real thing. I don't think I've ever dated anyone or been in a relationship with anybody who understood. I worked at a jail with juvenile
Mhm.
delinquents, but just the stress, the emotional stress, you know, unfortunately, when you work in the criminal justice field, a lot of the kids that I worked with are no longer alive because of the
Mhm.
choices that they were making. And
Mhm.
when you're in that career field and you're seeing somebody every single day and then they go out and then they're unalived on the streets, you don't have time to process it. They don't care that you've been with these kids 80 hours a week. They don't care that you've
Yeah.
formed a bond. It is, okay, that's another cycle. That's another kid that cycled through the system. They got what they did,
Ugh.
they were out there doing. So get back to work. And it's like, you
Yeah.
don't have time to grieve, but you
Mhm.
carry that with you because these are kids that you take care of. So you have to compartmentalize in a different way. And I
Mhm.
think it's hard when you're with somebody that doesn't understand that. So I can understand the trauma bond aspect in the sense of
Mhm.
I get where you're coming from and I understand why you might be in a certain mood one day or if you're feeling overwhelmed, like I can understand the trauma bond aspect of it.
Mhm.
So, what is something that is not mentioned in your book that you want readers to know about your book
Hmm.
or about you?
So I talked about this briefly on my podcast this week. Um, so there's a couple of like brief mentions in the book about this idea of whether or not I'm autistic.
Okay.
And first it comes up with a psychic in the book, and then I think I mention it with the person that I'm dating in the book at the end of the book, that's something that he mentions as well.
Mhm.
And when I was living it, there was like a really big point in therapy where I was talking to my therapist and I'd gone down the like autistic woman rabbit hole, right? And I was like checking all the boxes. I was like, "Oh my gosh, here
Yep.
I thought like this was my life like unique to me and I'm just I'm just autistic." Like
That's fair.
it explains everything.
Mhm.
Um and so I don't know, it might be fun for readers to like think about that as they read this story and they see me maybe missing these like social cues or like have really struggling with friendship and how I can make like I can belong in this group and shape and shift myself and the ways
Mhm.
that I self-medicated and just handled all of that. It might be interesting to sort of have that perspective. But yeah, at one point I was crying to my therapist and I was like, "What do you think?" And she's like, "Yeah, I mean, if you're thinking that, yeah, it makes sense. Like you probably are." And I was like, "No, I have to rewrite my whole book because it was like this massive perspective shift for me to
Yeah.
like really like think back through these things, even some of these things that are in the book and be like, "Oh, that's how signals got crossed, or that's how I missed the
Mhm.
mark, or I wonder how that would have impacted, like, I mean, even my marriage and the ways that I
Yeah.
understood, like, my relationships to other people, or the fact that, like, my directness would come off in some sort of way different than I intended. Like, it explained
Uh-huh.
why I never felt like people understood what I was trying to say and were taking it the wrong way.
Yep.
And, and I was like, "No, I have to rewrite the whole book." And she's like, "No, no, you
No, you
don't.
don't.
Like, it's
No.
okay." Because by then I was like in the edits, like in
Yeah.
the editing stage. But that might be something fun for the readers to kind of like see if they pick up on any of that.
Well, I love that too, though, because I'm glad that you didn't have the chance to rewrite it because you found out later. And
Mhm.
I feel like it almost would have kind of changed the journey of the book if you would have gone back with a different perspective of it.
That's
Like,
what's so hard about writing memoir is you literally have to freeze your perspective, and that's
yeah,
why, you said you're glad that I wrote it from just such a, like, close vantage point, but I was literally furiously trying to get the words down before something else would happen in my
yeah,
life that would change my perspective and force me to rewrite the whole thing. I mean, the
yeah.
divorce was one of those big things that, like, forced me to rewrite the whole book. Um,
Mm,
the autism was one that almost made me rewrite the whole book, And so you just have to freeze these moments. Like I said, I could not write this book from my vantage point now. It would be
yeah,
too nice. It would be
yeah,
too like, oh, it's fine that that awful thing happened because it all worked out in the end. Like, I would not be able to do it justice. I would not be able to tap into the anger or the frustration or the fear of any of it.
yeah. Yeah, and, so it's ironic that you mentioned this because I'm 36, and I found out when I was 27 or 28 that I'm ADHD. I'm also on the autism
Mm.
spectrum, and you're right. You go through this whole entire personality shift of like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, so I've been masking this whole time?
Yeah,
What do you
that's why I'm
mean?"
exhausted. That's why I have
Exactly.
anxiety in every social situation.
Yes, exactly, and you really do go through this personality shift of like, "Who am I?" I
Yeah.
mean, do I even know who I am? I still struggle with that
I
to
felt like
this
I was a
day.
checklist at that point. I'm like, I'm just this. I'm just
Yes,
this. This is everything about me that I thought was unique.
yes, and so what's crazy is I did an online checklist. It was like an
Mm.
online quiz of, "Do you think you're autistic? Take this."
Mhm.
And I was like,
Yeah.
"Well, say less." I love quizzes. I love school, so here we go. And I do it, and it was like,
There you go.
"You're
There's an hint. I
autistic."
love school.
Oh, I love school. Oh my gosh. But I was like it's like, "Oh, yep, you're autistic." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, you're dumb. I'm not autistic. There's no way I'm autistic." And then I was trying to get back on my Adderall because I was going back to school, and I was like, "I need to concentrate so bad." So I go to my
Mm.
my primary care physician, and I'm just and she was like, "Girl, first of all, we definitely need to get you back on your medicine, but you needed to see a therapist because that's how you get your medication." So I go to my therapist, and my therapist, I have a lot of like sensory issues with things. I don't like things touching my feet at all. I don't like crust. There's just so many weird things about me. I don't like odd numbers. And the therapist was like, "Have you ever been diagnosed with autism?" This is like 6 months after I took the quiz. And I was like, no, I have ADHD." And she's like, "You
Mm.
have ADHD." And I was like, I don't know what the Audi part is, but I have
Well, it's
ADHD.
autistic,
Yeah.
AUDHD. Yeah.
Yeah, she had to break that down for me. She's like, "You're basically autistic with ADHD." And I was
Yeah.
like, "I don't know what that means, but cool." And, so she broke it down for me, thankfully, but it made when I tell you, I was like, "No wonder why I hate pizza crust. No wonder why I hate sand on my feet and mud on
I
my feet."
know. You finally get to realize that, like, I don't know, there's this acceptance, right? Of
You're
like,
not weird.
oh, this is just how I am. I'm not
Yeah,
actually broken or flawed or messed up or whatever or needing or
exactly.
doing something ineffectively. Like, ah,
Yeah,
this is just me. I'm just someone who won't eat
yes.
pizza crust, and don't you dare show me the number 3 or whatever, you
Exactly.
know?
And I think what really, like, pivoted that was the people pleasing because then I was like,
Mhm.
when somebody told me, "When you do that, you're masking," I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, so now that it's been identified," I'm like, "I'm not gonna mask for you actually, because
Mhm.
quite frankly, you're ticking me off and I don't appreciate it." And it did kinda change my personality because I was able to I don't know if it happened with you, but, like, when you're able to identify what's happening, you're able to confront it real time moving forward, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So, when I would find myself flexing in and out of a mask, I'm like, "That's why I'm so tired. That's why I'm drained.
Right.
That's
You
why
can
I'm
just
mentally
go
just
home
tapped out."
or take a nap or be like, "Oh, I'm getting overstimulated. I
Yep,
need to take care of myself in this way." Like I
exactly.
shuffle cards all the time.
Yeah.
Like I don't have them here cuz they'd make too much noise, but like I sit in front of the TV and I just have to keep my hands busy and I like
Mhm.
shuffle cards all the
Yeah.
time.
And I don't know about, like, your reading habits, but, I know I've finished over 200 books this year, but I also listen to them. But people
Mm.
are like, "How do you listen at 3-point speed?" Like, I can't keep up. I'm like, "My brain has to have it that fast, or I
Oh,
can't
yeah.
pay attention,
I think
or
that's
you're
your
losing."
ADHD. I can't work like that, but
Exactly.
that might be your ADHD. Yeah.
That's very true. It definitely is, but I always have to be busy. I had surgery back in
Mhm.
December, and I started a whole business in January because I was bored. I was like, "All right, I can't sit here and do nothing."
That's
And
your
now here we are.
ADHD. Love it. Love
That's
it.
very true. But
It's like
yeah.
you got I see the autism, like, you're hyper focused on books, right?
Yep.
Like, and then your ADHD, like, "I'm gonna start a business."
And here we
I'm
are
sitting here, recovering from surgery. I can't do anything with my body, so I'm just gonna do all of this with my brain and
with my
build a whole
brain.
business. Yeah.
Exactly, but,
That's so
like, those
cool.
fidget spinners and things,
Mhm.
my partner and I talk about, 'cause we both talk about the autism thing, and we talk about how to keep, your brain busy and how, like, the sensory stuff, and it is just so I'm so glad that we have more conversations surrounding that,
Mhm.
because it's acceptance, and you can feel very lonely in that space, especially when you don't realize what's going on. So, do you talk about the autism spectrum or subject at all in the book?
There are, I think, 2 brief mentions. So the first person
Okay.
that ever associates that word with me is a psychic that I see. And she
Okay.
explains to me that the way she sees things is there are like 5, like, they're not guardian angels because there's 2 guardian angels, which are like angels, and there's like
Mhm.
5 like support people that
Okay.
so you have 7 people. Everyone has 7 people, except autistic people who also have aliens, and she said I had those. So I was
Oh,
like, "Wait, what?" Like, I'm not autistic. What is she talking about?
you're right.
And I just totally brushed it. And then when I started dating Jordan, he also said something like made some kind of comment about me being autistic, and I'm like, "I'm not I'm not autistic." And he's like, yeah, you are." And I was like, "No one's ever told me that before." And he's like, "Oh, you are."
Yeah.
Like, and he didn't know that I didn't know. He
Yeah.
just assumed that I knew. But yeah, I've I've taken the test. I check all the boxes of all
It's
the like
me.
online screenings. Yeah, like
Yep.
that fits.
Well, I love that though because when you're reading books, especially a memoir, there could very easily be somebody else out there like you where they have no idea that they're even
Mhm.
an increment on the spectrum.
Mhm.
And in reading your journey, they might relate in a lot of ways, and it might help them have that aha moment of, "Wait, is this something that I need to look into? Like, is this" and they can have that defining moment in their life where like, "Oh, I'm not weird. I'm not crazy. I'm not this way, it's
Mhm.
because of this that I am this way, and there's nothing wrong with being on the spectrum in any capacity at all whatsoever. Maybe I'm biased because I'm on the spectrum, but I think I'm pretty
Right.
awesome, but that's
I
just
like
me.
it.
I love it. So I think that's really cool that it's in your book to where it can provoke that thought, or at least that thought process of like, well, maybe I relate to this girl and her journey. Um, so I do love that a lot in the book. So, with that also being said, when it comes to, your next book, I know your life has pivoted quite a bit. Are you setting a timeline for yourself with that book, or are you just going to let it happen naturally and whenever it's done and that's when you'll publish?
Yeah, I just gotta let it happen naturally. It's really hard to I mean, I did it with this book. It's really hard to write the memoir when you don't know where it's gonna end because you
Right.
always create this beautiful, like, bookend between your first
Yeah.
chapter and your last chapter and the way
Yeah.
that you conclude the story and your evolution of your character. I mean, you still have to look at it as, like, I'm a
Yeah.
character, I'm going through this, like, lesson, right? But I don't know what my new belief is going to be by the end of this
Right.
next book because 'cause I'm just not there yet. But I've done this enough times, this as in life, to know that
Yeah.
I'm in for some big lessons, that I've already learned
Right.
some and I know there's more to come.
Yeah.
So no, I will probably focus on maybe trying my hand at that YA, kind of
Yeah.
fantasy type book while I let just life happen. And then once I have lived it, then I'll start writing it. But I am very diligent with my journal. So I am,
I love that.
any of these moments that happen in life, I'm writing about them. I'm noting how I feel. I'm noting every time my perspective shifts or my
Mhm.
mood shifts or I make a different decision than I would have before so that all of that can be future plot points in the next book.
I love that, I really do, and I really like the whole IA transition. I mean, I don't wanna call it a transition, but aspect of adding on to your author resume with a
Mhm.
whole new genre, and I think that's super exciting. So, when it comes to other authors and their journeys, what advice would you give for other authors?
I would tell them to trust that they are going to have the knowledge they need when they get to that step.
Okay.
And I think this goes back to like the source of so many of my fears in this writing process and publication process is I knew I didn't have the know-how or the patience or gosh, even the willingness to put myself on camera and talk about
Yeah,
myself when I started. And
yeah,
that is okay because you
right,
don't have to have it when you started. There's so much of becoming a published author. Like, there's so much. This is a 3.5 year journey.
right.
Over that course of time, like, I started to find my own voice. I
Mhm,
started a podcast. I honed my own voice. I mean,
yeah,
there's so much that goes into your evolution as a writer. So it's okay if you don't know how to edit when you start drafting. It's okay if you don't know how to format once you have a completed manuscript. There's so much you can teach yourself. There are also, resources that you can use to help educate yourself or you can hire people as well. But don't hold yourself back just cuz you don't have all the answers yet. Trust that you will have the answers when you get to that step.
right. I think that's very fair, and I think that's very valid. I know it can be extremely scary putting yourself out there. I don't know if you've had any trouble with marketing, but I definitely hear that marketing is, like, the biggest pain point. Like, people think it was hard to write the book, but it's even harder to market, and that's one of the biggest pain points I hear is, "I don't wanna get on camera. I don't wanna
Mhm.
talk verbally about the book." Like, I don't even really wanna tell people about the book because I don't know how to talk about the book after I've written it without giving away all the plot, without giving away spoilers, essentially. So I know that's as a reviewer, that's the hardest part for me because I'm like, um, there's a girl and a guy in the book.
Things
They
happen.
they go on a journey. I don't want to tell you everything. So as a reviewer, I can't imagine trying to tell somebody that my book without giving away the spoilers. So that has to be hard. But do you feel like the marketing's been difficult at all?
I have evolved to the point where I wasn't scared of talking on camera, of talking about my book. So I feel like I've been doing all of that. What is hard, I think, with the marketing is I don't feel like it's working. So, like, I'm
Mm,
showing up, I'm talking about the book. When I talk to people, especially like this one on one, like, everyone is so excited about the book. Like, it's like, oh, yeah, I want to read that. Oh, that's something that sounds interesting. So it's like, okay, I know I'm doing something right. But
right.
then, like I said, when I look at like pre-orders or even just general like interest, it just hasn't left my own sphere of influence, despite the
Mhm.
fact that I have a weekly podcast that I've gone on as a guest on multiple podcasts. I've had a
Right.
couple of different people write stuff up about the book. There's very positive reviews out there. I think it just takes time. I'm really looking forward to the in-person events because I think that's
Yes.
where I'm gonna make the biggest impact as far as my marketing. So,
Right.
yes, I have the social media stuff, but I think it
Mhm.
just adds, I'm real, I'm here, here's my social media to prove it, but like that's
Yeah.
not really selling anything to
Yeah.
anybody, right? So
Right.
like credibility, that's the word I was looking for. Like it gives some credibility, like, oh yes, this is a real person. Oh yes,
Mhm.
she has a real publishing press and business and all of this. But beyond that, I think the way I've sold books has been with the one-on-one connections that I've made. So
Right.
having these one-on-one conversations. So like the hosts of some of the podcasts I've been on have bought books, right?
Right.
Or someone I met on spring break vacation bought 2 copies of the book and is going to have her whole book club read it. So it's
That's
someone that I've
amazing.
had like, conversations with that
Yeah.
I think has really sold the book. So I'm really looking forward to those in-person events as I start doing my author signings and things like
Yeah.
that at bookstores or, um, there's a big sobriety storyline in the book, and I'm gonna be doing a local event that's centered around recovery, so I think that'll be
Yeah.
really fun to talk to people about the value of their own recovery stories, and, "Oh, by the way, here's mine if you're interested." So, yeah, I wasn't intimidated about the process, but it is it can be really disheartening as far as, like, how
Yeah.
much time and effort you put into it versus what you immediately get out of it,
Right.
and I've just chosen to do the marketing parts that feel good to me,
Yeah.
um, since I don't know that I'm gonna get much for it anyways.
Right. And I think so, I mean, before this year, if you would have ever told me that I would read a memoir, I would have physically laughed in your face and been like, "Absolutely not. That is not my genre. You're crazy." And I think there's this stigma around memoirs, and I think that this stigma personally as a reader, I think the stigma from memoirs comes from, like, celebrities and the
Mm,
celebrities telling their stories, and let's be realistic, yes, we can relate to celebrities on some way, but many of us don't fall into multi-millions worth of dollars and then buy our products from that multi-million dollars. We usually have a very different journey that takes us down different
less
things. So it's not
privileged maybe, yeah.
yeah, that's a fair word, and so it's a lot less relatable,
Mhm,
and so I think that there's a stigma around memoirs because now
mhm.
that I have read them, I'm like, "Whoa, I can absolutely relate to this person." I read another memoir from another author, and hers was actually the 2nd one I think I've ever read, and I loved her book so much where I was like, "What in the world?" I can relate to her on so many levels, and I feel so less alone in what I went
Mm,
through. And it read like fiction for the most part. Did I know that it was a memoir? Yes, I did. But I think a lot of people don't connect with the memoir because of the label that's put around it. And, well, I'm reading to escape my life. Well, I understand that, but you can still
mm.
escape your life and relate to somebody else's journey and it still be a great book. You know, I'm sorry there's not dragons in here that turn into vampires.
There are, I'm sure, I just, give them names.
Right? So I think that's also hard for the authors, but that is one thing that I do love about social media is when you do start to find people that not necessarily convert, but take a chance on a
Mhm,
genre that they don't typically read. And as a reader, talking to other readers, you're like, no, listen, I understand that there's this one little word that says memoir, but ignore that. Let's
yeah.
ignore that and let's dive into the story. It just becomes so much more immersive, and, like, The Mad Wife, that book that came out,
Mm,
I think that's gonna help memoirs, especially from the female's perspective, because so many people were like, "Oh, I relate to that. Oh my gosh, I relate to that." And I'm like, "Do you understand that you also relate to these things called memoirs? Do you know that?" So I think that's one part that from a memoir author's perspective, I think that that would be difficult is to kind of cross that because there is, don't get me wrong, there's definitely a population of people that love memoirs and will
yeah.
100% support memoirs. But I think that that would intimidate me almost of like, well, dang, how do I convince people without convincing people that a memoir
Mm.
is, worth reading? Um,
I'm one of those people that loves reading memoir, and I
mhm.
can't get my hands on enough of them. I mean, screw the celebrity memoirs, but the other ones,
Right.
um,
That's fair.
I mean, even the ones where like someone does some like incredible like physical feat, right? Like I still
Mm,
like I'm really interested in just their process and how
yeah.
they overcome their fears and their doubts and stuff. So I don't know that I ever looked at it from your perspective of like, oh gosh, how am I going to convince these people to like read something because it's memoir and they may not like memoir. I just, from my own experience, I love memoir so much that I figured this will be great for all the people who love memoir and not trying to convert
Absolutely.
anyone over
Yeah.
who just doesn't have a thing for that genre. Um, but I think there are some good ones out there that have been, like Wild, which was turned into a movie. I think there is some more approachability that's happened in the more recent years. But
Yeah.
yeah, I guess I wasn't too worried about that, but along those same lines, Candace, when I originally pitched my book to an agent, she told me that my book was not suitable for trad publishing because it was too relatable. I.e., I
That's
wasn't
weird.
distinguishing myself enough as the author, as my story is unique, because of course they're big on the celebrity ones or the major, physical feats or
Yep.
endurance guy or, someone who's done something super crazy in their lives. She
Yeah.
told me that my book was not marketable in the traditional publishing realm because there was nothing like unique enough about my story to like set it apart. And I said, great. I'm going to self-publish it, and clearly it's so relatable that
Yeah.
people are going to love it and buy it because of that relatability. Like, what you say is the downside of my book is what I say as this is a worthy investment, and I should
Literally.
absolutely publish this book.
Yes. 100%. So, did that discourage you at all, or was that fuel to your fire to keep going with it?
Oh, it was absolutely fuel, and it helped, like, totally put the kibosh on that whole, like, line that authors have to ride of, like, "Do
Mhm.
I take this trad? Do I go into the query trenches? Do I, do self-publishing? Do" and so, I was actually really grateful to have that feedback at that point because that was still pretty early on. I was
Mhm.
probably a year and a smidgen into writing this, and I didn't have a completely rewritten draft post-divorce at that point. So I was glad to learn at that point that, nope, I'm going to self publish this. So I'm going to make sure that I'm present on social media, that I'm building
Yeah.
a platform because I'm going to have to market this myself. And I need to start surrounding myself with, like finding editors, finding people that are going to support me in this journey. And so since I knew at that point, I could go ahead and start rallying the troops.
Yeah. I love that you were already forward thinking in that. As someone who talks to authors, I hear it all too often of I didn't even think about getting a social media presence until after I had already published or I was about to publish. So I
Mhm.
do love the fact that you were already kind of forward thinking in that. So the last question I have for you before I let you go back to your night is, do you have any questions for the readers that you would want to know from the reader's perspective?
Ooh. I mean, I'm always so curious about what part of my story people relate to because
Ooh.
I throw a lot in there. I mean, there's divorce, there's motherhood, there's
Mhm.
career changes, there's moves, there's loss of friendships, there's all sorts of things. And I'm always curious about which part like really like spoke most deeply to them.
Yeah.
I mean, that's obviously autism. I'm
Yep.
craving these connections, right? Like
Yep.
I'm craving this sense of like, can you relate to me? Are we the
Yep.
same?
You could just become best
And
friends.
yeah, right. And so I'm so eager to find out like what of these things people relate to. Or another question I'm always curious about is in reading this book, did you feel inspired to take some action that you had been not pursuing, dragging your feet on, because there's so many points in this story where I have to really take the reins in my own hands
Mhm.
and make some tough decisions.
Right.
And I'm curious if that inspires readers to do anything like that in their life. I have
I
this,
love that.
vision and hope that one day I'm going to check my email and I'm going to see an email from a reader that says that this book has had some significant impact in their life and it will have all been worth it.
Yeah. No, I love that. So I know, like, you had mentioned the book club. I know I just said it was gonna be the last question, but this is my last question, I promise. With the book club, have you thought about adding on, like, a book club portion where it has, like, questions that would facilitate, the thought-provoking questions, or
I
are you gonna leave that
have.
alone?
I've thought about it because I have several book clubs that I know are already committed. I want
Ooh.
to create like a book club feature on my website so
Mhm.
people can order them in bulk from me, get author signed copies like all shipped to them at one time if they
Yeah.
want to like, order in the same window of time or something. So I want to make it easier for book clubs because I do think this would be a great book club book. But
Yeah.
because it's memoir and because it's meant to like the reader's meant to take their own perspective from it, I
Mhm.
don't feel right making any sort of like reflection questions or guiding questions around the conversations. I'm hoping that as I get to sit in and answer readers' questions live at these book club offerings or virtually at these book club offerings, that I'll get a sense of what readers are taking away from it and are interested in talking about.
Yeah.
And then so maybe I'll build something out from there. But as I've tried to think about like how would I want to guide readers' conversations around this book, I absolutely want no part in that. Like
Yeah.
I want them to take what they do from this book and do with it what they will. And I just remind myself all the time that, like, sure, this is my story, but as soon as it's in a reader's hands, they imprint their own experiences, their own beliefs, their own values onto it, and it becomes
Right.
whatever they need it to be. And so it's
Right.
how you read it is different than how someone else reads it, and someone else, and someone else. And that's why some people hate books and some people love them.
Very true.
um, and so for now, I want to support book clubs getting involved with this, but I'm not putting together any sort of reader discussion guide.
So instead of a reader discussion, what about journal prompts? Just like something to help them flow, not necessarily like the reader discussion or how
Mhm.
to, how did this make you feel? But have you ever like maybe thought about journal prompts? Because obviously you're journaling in the book.
Mhm.
You have clear prompts. I will tell you, as someone who has severe PTSD from journaling, I want to journal. But my mom has passed away, and so I'll tell you just a quick little synopsis of this. I used to journal all the time. I would journal every single thought that I had, but my mom would go in and read my journal and then call
Mm.
everybody in the family and be like, "Well, guess what Candace wrote? And guess what Candace did?" And I'm 36 years old, and I would love nothing more than to write a journal. My therapist is like, "Well, journal it, write it down." I'm like, I physically cannot do that because I know that my mother is deceased and that I'm in a very adult relationship, but I don't trust even living alone that the maintenance man won't come in and read my journal or, something crazy. And so sometimes when I do see journal prompts, it does help me. Like, I'll just go ahead and start writing that. I usually rip it up and throw it away. But, you know, um, as someone with severe PTSD, I think that I would almost benefit from that to make myself write it out. But I don't know if that's something that if you would be even interested entertaining the idea of a journal prompt, you know?
I mean, I love journal prompts, and I've done them for the writing business that I run, as far as
Mhm.
just like self-reflection for writers, right?
Oh, that's
As we
cool.
get ready to write memoir, like it's part of my memoir writing course where we do some journaling to help figure out what stories are even available to us that we're ready to discuss and potentially write about. I haven't considered it in like coordination with this book, but I
Mhm.
certainly love journaling. So,
Yeah.
I
Ooh.
have a similar, I mean, my mom never held it against me, I guess, but there was always the threat with my journals,
Oh, yeah.
where she made it very clear that if she ever felt like she had every right to come in and read my journal. So I made
Yeah.
sure I lied in my journals. I
Yeah.
made sure that whatever I was telling her about where I was going or what I was doing matched what was in my journal. So
Yeah.
it's so interesting because, like, my journals were not like truth at all. I mean, I'm sure some emotional elements that were still true, but I had to like make sure the
Right.
details aligned. So
Yeah.
I think I've come a very long way in that process, and the fact that now I'm sharing my journals with the world and published in this book. Um, but yeah, I had to overcome a lot of those same fears that you expressed about,
Mhm.
like, being so terrified of someone reading your journals. And my mom will not keep a journal, like, similarly to how you said, like, she's terrified of
Yeah.
writing anything down. And even if she had it in a lockbox, even at
Yep.
whatever, what if she died and then the kid read it? And like, she
Yep.
absolutely wants no one to know her, like, inner thoughts at all.
Yeah.
Um, but my journal has been so, so helpful for my own healing and processing. And each December, I go back and I do an annual journal review where I read through all my entries for the year. And I have
Oh.
created questions for that, of like how I assess my journals and the
Yeah.
trends I notice, the cycles, the patterns, that I pick up on.
Yep.
And it helps me really tweak how I like move forward in
Yeah.
life and what things I keep doing, or what friendships I let go ahead and fade out,
Mhm.
or just the ways I like come to terms with the realities of certain situations that keep recurring.
I
So
love that.
I do love journaling. I hope you'll get there one day. It can be a nice asset.
I think I will, only because when I tell people my story, the first question I always get asked is, "How are you normal?" I'm like, "Wait, I'm normal? Are you sure? Do you know me? You don't know me." I don't think I'm normal at all. And then usually it's like, "Well, I'm so sorry that happened to you." And I'm like, "But I'm not, because it made me who I am today." And
Mhm.
because any kind of abuse that you can think about, like sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, anything that you could think of, that I've been through it, and I just think it makes me more relatable to people because I can understand a lot more, and I can
Mhm.
understand when they feel or they might react a certain way. So, I think eventually I do wanna get to the point of being able to write it out because unlike you and the cool memoir that you have, I think what I'll end up writing is a fiction based on my life.
Mhm.
I'm just I don't think I'm ever gonna get past the fear of my family reading what I've written, and I'll probably write under a pen name, and it'll probably be I wanna say it'll probably be like a mystery thriller suspense because when my mom passed away, I'm pretty sure my mom didn't pass away from natural causes, but I can't prove
Mm.
it, and I think I know the person that might have helped her either with an assisted unaliving or who purposely made her cross the grave at 42 years old.
Mm.
So I think I wanna write it, like, in a mystery suspense genre
Yeah.
probably. So I think eventually I will get there. Someone had mentioned doing a voice to text on your phone
Mhm.
and just, like, data dumping that way, and so I think that's how I'll originally start, and with being ADHD, I'm all over the place. I'll start, when I'm 16, then go back to when I was 8, and then back to when I was 5 and watch things happen to my mom and things like that,
Mhm.
so I have a feeling I'll jump all over the place, and then kind of like you, I think I'll outsource a lot because I just don't think that with my ADHD, I'll be able to really go where I wanna go with it,
Yeah.
and it be that way. So I think eventually I'll get there. I just don't think it'll be anytime in the next year.
Yeah, and I think there's something too said for like hiring professionals when I mean, I felt like I just poured so much into my story
Mhm.
and I wanted it to look professional. You know,
Right.
I wanted it to have a very professional look because I knew how much I'd put into it. I
Yeah.
hired professional editors, and that wasn't cheap. So it's like I don't want
Mm-mm.
to have this like beautiful story that's encased in this cover that doesn't look put together, that doesn't look
Right.
right, that looks in the derogatory sense
Right.
self-published when people use that in a way to mean
Yeah.
like low quality. And
Yeah.
so I that was a very conscious choice that I made, knowing that I was probably spending more than is at all reasonable to expect that I make from this book. But this book also talks about other things I do, like memoir coaching or
Mm.
the Inspired Writer Collective podcast, other things. So who
Yeah.
knows if, I get some people that want to come and work with me to write their memoirs, then that's money that the book's brought in. So it's not book
Right.
sales, but it's still profits. And yeah, maybe it makes a difference that way too.
Exactly. I mean, I'm over here thinking to myself, like, maybe I should reach out to you about my story and you could help me get it out there.
Yeah.
So there's already one connection. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right because statistically speaking, 86% of readers will buy a book solely based on the cover art alone. And
I
as
have. I have as a reader.
100%. I can't even tell
Yeah.
you how many books on this shelf are just solely because I have no idea what the book's about. I couldn't tell you. Don't even ask me. Don't even ask me what genre it is, okay? It looked pretty and it's coming home with me. So your cover art is absolutely stunning and I love the lonely girl because if you don't know
Yeah.
it's a memoir, when you're walking by it, you're still going to be inclined to, especially if you like crime in any kind of
Mhm.
capacity, because it looks like a crime scene. Like, what just
Mhm.
happened? So you're going to be prompted to pick up the book. So I love it because as a primarily fiction reader, you would still draw me in because of the cover art. And
Mhm.
I see terrible and respectfully terrible cover art and I'm like I would respectfully never pick that up because it's solid black with Times New Roman font. I'm going to
Mhm.
scan right past that. And I understand that
Well,
you're
and
trying to save a dollar, but
self-published
oof.
memoir often has, like, the author's picture on the very front, and I'm like, "I'm
Yeah.
not famous. My picture does not need to be in the front. I'm not even sure if I want it on the back," And
Right.
it's just like
Yep.
but, yeah, I mean, I guess I totally got into those spilled coffee, and I never explained that police line, image at the bottom, and, yes, it's certainly there because of the forensics part that, like, starts this book, but exactly what you said is what I wanted to trigger, is I
Mhm.
wanted it to be a little bit eye-catching in that way of like, "Wait,
Yes.
what's that? That's curious." Even if you
Mhm.
notice that it's a memoir and you're like, "Wait, there's gonna be, some kind of
What
crime or
happened?
something,"
Yep.
right? I wanted you to at least pick it up off the shelf and flip it over and read the blurb. And then
100%.
the blurb would, steer you in the right direction as like, "No, this is not gonna be a thriller. No, this is not a
Right.
murder mystery." But if you got that far, then that's all I wanted was for someone to
Exactly.
take the book off the shelf and read the blurb and see if it was for them. And
Yep.
if it was, then great. And if it's not,
Fantastic.
that's fine. Put it back. The police tape gotcha. I know. It was put there
Right.
for a reason. It worked.
Yep. But you stopped. That's the point is you stopped,
Right.
out
Right.
of all of these books. So I definitely think that you accomplished that because if I never would have met you and I would have seen this at, a Barnes& and Noble or Books A Million, I
Mhm.
assure you, I thriller is my first favorite. Thriller and suspense are my very first favorite. And anything crime related, I'm like, you're coming with me. So absolutely would have stopped and picked it up. And I think that's amazing too, because like we were kind of talking earlier, is memoir has a stigma around it. And I
Mhm.
think, you know, in my personal opinion, there are so many fiction readers where I'm like, I wish you would just pick one up and read it that's not celebrity based and just see just try it. It's like trying an ice cream flavor that you've never tried before. Just
Right. Like
try it.
pistachio. Like now pistachios and
Exactly.
everything, but you might like it.
Exactly, or, Dubai chocolate.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
first, everyone was like, "That's disgusting, I would never eat that, it's green," and now, like, you can't get
It's
it's out
everywhere.
of stock everywhere, you know?
It's everywhere.
I don't know who made it popular, but that's great. So, I think you did a fantastic job on the cover art, I sincerely love it myself, and like I said, when I first opened it, I completely forgot. I talk to so many authors every day where I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah, you do.
please don't judge me. I don't remember exactly which book you wrote, until I have more of a conversation, when
Yeah.
it's more, one-on-one, then I'll remember your book for the rest of my life. But when
Right?
it's, in passing, yesterday I got home from work and I was like, I have 58 emails and like 55 Instagram messages and I have, I don't know, like 60 TikTok messages and 14 Threads messages. I'm like, I'm trying to
Ugh.
keep them all straight. So when I opened it, I was like, "Ooh, I wonder what happened." And then I was like, "Oh, it's a memoir." I'm even more excited now because I have been introduced to that genre. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
think
and
it's
you'll
gonna be
introduce
fantastic.
so many other people. I mean, you
Mhm.
are probably a better gateway than I am simply because you're coming from that sense of like, okay,
Right.
guys, I trust me. I know I don't
Right.
normally like this stuff, but this one,
Exactly.
So
Yep.
like I think you can speak to that community even so much better than I can because I'm like, it's memoir. Of course it's amazing. You just get to take exactly what you need from it. You leave the rest
Yep.
there. Like if you're not ready for that lesson or you've already learned that one, like it's
Yep.
totally fine. And I'm not going to force feed it down your throats.
Yep.
That's what I love
Exactly.
about memoir.
Yeah, and that's what I love about being the reader of, when
Mhm.
I'm getting to talk to people. I tell people I have the best of both worlds because not only do I get to connect with the author and hear their story, whether it be fiction or nonfiction, it doesn't matter. I get to hear their story and I get to be their little cheerleader. But then also, when I truly love a story, I'm like, no, but you listen, sit down,
Listen.
buckle up, enjoy this ride I'm about to put you on. Thank me later, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, it happened today at work. I had sent a book to a girl. She was going through it, and I take care of my team at work. I love taking care of my team. She was going through some stuff, and I said, "Listen, I think you just need to read this book. I love this book." I sent it to her today. She was like, "Oh my gosh, Candace, what did you send me? I need more." I'm like, "I told you you needed to read that." So I
Mhm.
I love the fact that, I can also have that perspective from a reader where if I don't necessarily believe in it or if I don't like it, I'm not going to promote it a ton. I'm not going to
Mhm.
talk about it all the time. Will I go on and do my review? Yes, I will. But if it's something
Mhm.
I love, like you'll hear me talk about it over and over again.
Mhm.
And I think that you build credibility with your reader like that way as well. So I feel like I have the best of both worlds and I love that so much. But I can already tell you I'm gonna be that person that's like, no, you see this lonely girl right here? You freaking go read it. Freaking go read it right now.
Oh, please do.
My boyfriend and I, we've been doing this whole business thing together.
Mhm.
And everyone has this niche thing, right?
Mhm,
Where they're
mhm.
like, "Oh, I'm predominantly romance or I'm
Right.
predominantly fantasy." And I'm like, "I'm predominantly everything." Uh
You're indie author, that's specific.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I will probably talk to you offline about putting this in our store, of course, naturally. But we are wanting to start a book club with our influencer team in
Mm.
our Discord. And I would love nothing more because with our influencers, we have influencers that read every single genre. We put a memoir on our survey for them. And you would be amazed. Out of 2,000 influencers, I think we had almost 100 of them that read memoir, that wanted memoir
Mm,
books, and I was like, "Well, that's exciting because I have memoir authors, so let me just go ahead and just dabble this on the shop," you know? Um, so I'll definitely be talking to you offline about putting her on the shop, but I
awesome.
love it. I love both sides of it. But yeah, outside of that, did you have any questions for me?
No, I just can't wait to hear what you think about it when you get a chance to read it. And of course, I want to have you come on the Inspired Writer Collective podcast. We've kind
Ooh.
of penciled that in for the fall. So I'll be reaching out soon so we can chat more about that. But I want to have you come on the podcast and just talk about how indie authors can use people like you and how we do that in a way that's helpful for everyone
Mhm.
and what that process looks like so that other people who, like me, are publishing for the first time, that can be one of those fears that we help relieve for them. Because that was one of those fears
Right.
that I had was like, oh, how do I do this? And what are the
Yeah,
rules of this space? And I'm just coming into this and I'm not in this world. And how do I work with someone? How is
right.
this mutually beneficial? And
Yeah.
so I'm excited to continue the conversation in that way.
Yeah, I would love that. I love talking about all things indie, and especially at work, I'm like, "Have you read an indie author's book?" And they're like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Let me introduce you to something that you need right now. Thank you very
Mhm.
much." And I have a few people converted, so I'm pretty proud of that.
That's amazing.
Oh, I love it. I love it so much. I swear I need a shirt that just says I'm an indie author advocate to where I can wear it outside all the time.
You need
I
to.
I'll probably just make my own. I'll probably just design it and print it out
Okay,
because
well, send me a copy. I'll buy one because I need that shirt too.
I love it. Well, I did design I support indie authors, and that's gonna be here this week. It's a fantasy one. It has, 2 dragons on it and a little knife as the T of the author,
I
and
did
then
see that. I did see
yeah.
that because I was
Oh,
like,
I love
"Oh,
it.
man, if only it wasn't fantasy themed because I need something that's, like, for the memoir writers." But
Yes.
but
I
I'll
will tell
figure it out.
you, the genres I am working on getting other genres done. It's just I have an 8 to 5 and then I have a 5 to
Yeah.
8. But yeah, so I will definitely keep you updated on that. But I appreciate your time for you sitting down with me and talking about your book and talking a little things not book related, but kind of book related.
Oh, it's all
Um,
book related.
that's very true. It's all pivotal moments. So I do
Right.
appreciate you so very much. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us and be sure to join us next time.